for joining me in this conversation. It's very
Right.
very nice to hear.
Conversations are very important these days.
Hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. And I really appreciate you participating on this because you were one of the persons who helped me a lot to in my path through conducted improvisation when you open the door for being with the London improvisers with you.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
I know you have lots of things to tell, histories, and it would be great if you could maybe start talking a bit about how did you get into this thing of conducted improvisation, because I know you went through a lot of free improvisation in your life, and then you also do conduct and promote the London improvisers. You are a very important person for all this, and I would love to hear from you your perspective.
Well, okay. Well, um, what do you want first? The history of how I got into doing the conduction stuff.
Yeah,
You want to
I
know
mean
that?
it's a pretty open conversation, and
Yeah,
it's just whatever you want to share about this
yeah.
subject.
No, that's fine. I was in. I used to go to New York quite often,
Hmm.
and I played at the Stone and did little tours and things like that. And I had a lot of friends in. Well, I have a lot of friends in New York, but it's much more complicated to go there and play music now
Hmm.
for everybody. Well, everything's impossible at the moment, obviously, but even before that, it was very difficult to get it. Anyway, I was there. I saw Butch Morris,
Hmm.
the cornet player, who didn't invent it but developed this idea of conduction.
Hmm.
And this is a system whereby you have an ensemble and you have a set of uh, hand signals,
Hmm.
and you, as a conductor, improvise.
Hmm.
And then the musicians respond to the hand signals, which mean quite specific things.
Hmm.
So I saw this at an art gallery, I think, in Manhattan. I really liked it, and came back to London. And at some point, the saxophone player Evan Parker and the trumpet player Ian Smith, now known as Ian McGowan, I don't know why, but anyway, he was called Ian Smith, um, said that it would be a good idea to create an ensemble in England and invite Butch Morris over.
Hmm.
And I'd met Butch Morris. I liked him very much. I thought he's an amazing cornet player, actually. I think underrated. He's extraordinary. And so somehow we got the thing that was called the Contemporary Music Network,
Hmm.
which was mainly notated music, but it organized tours
Hmm.
for ensembles from all over to play all over England. So that was great. And they said, yes, we'll do it. Excuse me, I'm going to blow my nose.
No, no problem.
And um, so I fixed a band. Let me just look around the house. Here we are. Okay. I've got it. Okay, this is my my London Improvised Orchestra folder. This is if you can see, yeah, you can see
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's the program. It was 1997.
Wow.
And it was, 15, what was it? 15, 20 people. And because I'd seen Butch,
Hmm.
uh, I'd seen his ensemble, and it was noticeable that it was very diverse in age, in gender, in background. I liked that very much.
Hmm.
And we put a band together that was quite diverse.
Hmm.
Um, and we did a tour: Liverpool, Birmingham, Oxford, Manchester, Bristol, and London.
Wow.
And after that, we decided we liked playing in a large ensemble,
Hmm.
but we left it a year because some people weren't so happy about it. We thought, okay, let's let it blow over and we'll come back to it. So then we instigated an ensemble that almost instantly got called the London Improvised Orchestra, which is a very boring name. Um, Butch had ensembles in various cities like Berlin, Tokyo, Istanbul, and of course New York, which he always called Skyscraper. So we were in the London Skyscraper, but we called this band the London Improvised Orchestra, and it was certainly very much off the back of Butch Morris's Conduction tour.
Mm-hmm.
And it started using the same signals, but we diversified those signals. We diversified the idea of the conductor, because in Butch's case, it was always Butch conducting. He conducted the whole night. And we decided anybody in the orchestra who wanted to conduct could conduct. And of course, it's very interesting, but everybody brings in their own style. And of course, over the now 22 years since we've been doing it pretty well every month, that's pretty good, I think.
Yeah, that's outstanding. That's fantastic.
Of course, it makes absolutely no sense financially. You can't possibly have an ensemble of up to nearly 40 people every month and pay them anything.
Yeah, sure.
Unless nobody would give us the money. It's mad. But we get places. We used to play in a place called the Red Rose. Then we played at various other places. We played a little bit at Cafe Oto. We still do, I think, 1 gig a year at Cafe Oto. But mainly we play in a place called Eclectic, which is in South London, a very beautiful venue. And also in a church in, what do we call it? Northeast London, I suppose, in Stoke Newington, which is near Cafe Oto. There's a beautiful church we can use as well. So we do it once a month. And as I said, anybody in the ensemble who wants to conduct can conduct. There are no real criteria for having people in the orchestra. I mean, basically, if people want to be in the orchestra, they can be in the orchestra in a way, I mean, if they turned out to be impossible to work with, then we might throw them out, but that's never happened. And we, of course, we like visitors. We welcome people passing through London. But basically, anybody who wants to be in the orchestra, particularly if somebody in the orchestra already knows them, can do that. So, but we like to know what they sound like and what their attitude is. It's kind of,
Yes.
So people develop their own conduction signals. Some of them based on Butch's signals, some of them from somewhere else. And of course, I've done things like John Zorn's Cobra, which is a very different piece, but uses some of the same directions because, of course, you're limited in how much you can direct somebody to do without play something in C sharp minor with a, which is fast. And you can't give them signals like that.
Yeah, sure.
And you can say, stop, go, do something long, do something short, be quiet, be loud. Those kind of signals are very easy, But then people develop their own thing. Phil Waxman, who has a classical background, is perhaps the most free-form conductor. He uses signals that even he doesn't know what they mean.
Oh, wow.
So so it's it can be a very free-flowing thing.
Yeah.
Plus, we always say, I think we all feel that what the conductor is doing is no more important than what the players are doing. Right. Basically, the conductor is like another member of the orchestra. And in the same way, in improvised music, I might hear somebody play a little motif, but I don't have to repeat it. I could do something against it, So in the same way, people who don't want to obey the conductor's signals don't have to, although it would be kind of mad to be in an orchestra where you never take any notice of the conductor. That's ridiculous. Go to another, But anyway, so that works out all right.
Yeah, Steve. And well, this is definitely how can I put that? this goes through my very first question that I have for you, and is because you have seen so many conductors. I suppose so, that you have seen many conductors in those 20 years of the London improvisers, and I wonder, and I want to know, how do you see the real role of the conductor? Because you've been through, you worked a lot with free music as well. I know that, and when you put a conductor in the ensemble, what is the role of this guy if he's not more important, and what does he do in your
Okay.
view?
Sometimes it's a she, remember, as well. There are plenty of female conductors.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Um, it's really up to them. Actually, what you say is probably not that true. I don't think there's been that many conductors. There have
Okay,
been. There's a huge list of musicians who've played in the orchestra, in the London Improvised Orchestra.
okay.
Huge list. Well, I mean, we had our 20th anniversary and we did 2 gigs at Cafe Oto,
Hmm.
and somebody printed out a whole list. It's enormous. There's just maybe people who only play once with us, but we make a list, and
Hmm.
we know who's played with us pretty well, pretty well.
Yeah.
We've probably forgotten one or two people, but um, so the number of people who play with us is huge. The number of people who've conducted is quite small
Okay.
because people tend to come back and conduct again, and not that many people want to be conductors.
Hmm.
Now, as for their role, I would say it's very much up to them.
Okay.
It's really up
That's
to
a
them.
great answer.
Yeah. I mean, there's a guy called, I think his name is Marcus Eichenberger,
Okay.
who I saw, I think he's Swiss. I've got a CD by him. It's on M&M. It's a nice CD. And he only has one signal,
Hmm.
which is really interesting. And when he works with his ensemble, he has one symbol, one signal rather, which
Okay.
is to tell the ensemble to change. This was also a signal in Cobra by John Zorn,
Hmm.
music change. So whatever you're doing, you do something really different.
Okay.
If you're playing loudly, play soft. If you're playing fast, play slow. If you're not playing, play. If you're not playing, if you are playing, don't play.
Hmm.
That kind of thing. So there's almost like a tape edit as the baton or hand comes down.
Hmm.
The music changes, hopefully radically.
Hmm.
And Eichenberger used just that signal. Uh, what was my point here? So yeah, so for instance, when he would work with us, that was it. He just used that. As I said, Phil Baxman has gestures that we're not sure about. Um, there's a kind of jam session going on outside. It's very interesting. They've done a couple of Stevie Wonder tunes and a Kiss tune. I mean, not
Nice.
Kiss tune. Prince's Kiss, not a tune by Kiss. Heaven forbid. No, they've got a good taste, and they're doing some nice old R&B tunes.
Nice.
So I don't know if you can. It's probably too quiet to hear, but anyway. Anyway, so and people mix the ideas up, so you could have four conductors
Hmm.
conducting different areas. We've had dancers conduct
Yes.
the orchestra. We just follow their movements. We've had people make films that might give us instructions or might be very impressionistic, and we just work out what we think they mean.
Hmm.
So it can be extremely vague or extremely specific.
Yes, that's definitely something that caught my attention in the London improvisers,
Yeah,
because the way people who will conduct on that night, they introduce what they're gonna do, or one gesture or one idea just before the concert, and
yeah,
that definitely caught my attention.
yeah.
And I wonder, can you share, because you told me that it's up to the conductor, he or she, what he or she gonna do on stage. But I would like I would like to ask, what is your personal vision as a conductor when you were conducting? What do you want to?
I don't start with a vision.
Nope.
No,
Okay. Okay.
there's no vision.
No vision. You just
You deal with what's there. You
okay.
know.
Okay. But do you have any strategies, or do you propose something for your body? Do you prefer to
No,
use signs, or do you prefer to use free form conducting?
no. I use signs that tend to mean something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I often use signs that are not clear.
Okay. Okay.
Um, uh, and I use a very, although I mean, even in this program,
Mm-hmm.
there's a list of signs that Butch uses that are, what are they like? Yeah, there's probably 15 signs, and that's just for the audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a huge book which I also have, which is about conduction with maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
100, 200 signs. I don't know. I could not do that. There's another guy in New York
Uh-huh.
called, I think he's called Walter Thompson.
Right. The sound painter.
Sorry?
The sound painter. Yes. Yes.
You know about him.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
apparently he has thousands of signs.
That's right.
Yeah, I can't possibly see how that can work.
Uh-huh.
I have about five, really. That's
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's interesting. That's very interesting because all these guys you are talking about, all these people you are talking about. I actually had interviewed in these talks until now 22 people who does different styles of conducted improvisation,
yeah,
including Walter Thompson. He also
yeah,
participated in one of them, and it's very nice to see how different people has their own visions, their own experiences, and how they propose different things. Like
yeah,
some of them using thousands of gestures, some of them using no sign at all, just free form
yeah.
conducting, and this how do you say this all these layers of this practice, it interests me a lot. And
Yeah.
well,
Well, if we look at,
okay.
I mean, just look at any film of Sun Ra.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
You'll
definitely.
always do a section, usually when all the replayers get those weird electronic things out,
Mm-hmm.
wheels on the end. I think they're like really early Yamaha saxophones, electric saxophone. I don't know what they're.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of amazing. And and he, I don't think there's any set meaning to his gestures, but they're very expressive gestures,
Yeah.
and it certainly creates something. But of course, they rehearse like crazy, the Sunlight Orchestra. So that's also it. You might know much more about his intentions
Mm-hmm.
from just rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing.
Yeah.
Um, but he had a different style. I mean, the guy that Butch Morris got the idea from was Charles Moffat, you know, the drummer
Mm-hmm.
from the Ornette Coleman Trio, um, and other things as well. Actually, Charles Moffat's on some amazing records. So he had a kind of conduction system, which was the root of Butch Morris's conduction system.
Mm-hmm.
And I never saw, I haven't seen a film of it or anything. I don't know what he did.
Okay. Yeah. And nice. Yeah, definitely. And Charles Moffat was definitely a great guy who influenced him. And I've heard that also Butch Morris was having classes with Lucas Foss, who was working with Bernstein, and Bernstein was also doing some free conducted improvisation. And
Okay, I think Lucas Foss was more interested in that area
yeah,
than
yeah.
Bernstein. But there's a story, there's a book called Experimentalism Otherwise by Benjamin Peacock. Do you know this book?
I've heard, but I never read. Yeah.
It's definitely worth reading.
Okay.
And there's a whole chapter about, as you say, Bernstein did want the New York Philharmonic
Mm-hmm.
to play free improvisation. And this was in a concert in which they played some cage pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And the combination of John Cage and Leonard Bernstein was kind of uncomfortable.
Okay.
And they're very different characters, you know. and I don't think any of it went down very well with the symphonic players.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but many myths have erupted from that particular concert,
Mm-hmm.
and Ben Peacock goes into great detail
Mm-hmm.
to sort the truth from the myths,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting. But I think, yeah, I think Bernstein was a clearly an open-minded guy who, by the way, wrote some amazing pop songs
Mm-hmm.
and was clearly interested in what Cage was doing, but perhaps was a little patronizing, I think, and maybe towards his musicians as well.
I see.
He was a kind of he didn't suffer false modesty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much you can go with that, but it's certainly interesting that Butch studied with Lucas Foss. That would make much more sense
Yeah.
than studying with Bernstein. Butch was certainly a great fan of conductors in general. Apparently, he had a whole bookshelf full of biographies of the great conductors.
Wow, that's super interesting. And
Yeah.
um, well, if I can go back to one thing that we are talking a bit early, I keep with great, I keep with great care this list of gestures that
Oh yeah.
you
Okay.
gave me in London
Yeah.
a few years ago, and you mentioned that you use around 5 gestures, and I was super interested if you could share which or some of them that you like to use.
Okay. Well, we stole the Marcus Eichenberger one.
Okay.
And I can't remember what he did, but okay, this is he wore these glasses. You don't get many avant-garde pairs of glasses in England.
Uh-huh.
When you, one of the things you notice if you go to France or Holland or Germany, or you see people with much more colourful glasses.
Okay.
Here we're quite conservative, and Marcus Eichenberger had some very noticeable glasses on
Mm-hmm.
that you wouldn't see in England. And I think they were kind of upside down ones, where the bit that goes back over the ears is underneath rather than on top, something like that.
uh,
So in my mind, I thought of a very famous comedian called Eric Morecambe, who Derek Bailey used to play in the Pit Orchestra for,
mm-hmm.
who does this thing with his glasses where he wobbles his glasses. So this became a symbol. This was the signal for music change.
Okay.
Wobbling glasses, and then you do a downbeat or double-handed downbeat
Mm-hmm.
like that. That's the cut. That's
Okay.
sometimes something phases from one thing to another, but very often it's like boof, it's changed. So that's one, for instance.
Okay.
Another is, can you see my hand?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. An outstretched palm, you hit it, and that means play a long note.
Okay.
If you hit a fist, and it means play a short note. This is, I can't explain it and do it at the same time, of course. This is play a sound without pitch.
Okay.
Um, Obviously, a drummer can do that more easily than, say, a flute player, but there are things you can do. There's one way where the baton goes across
Right.
that, called a pan,
Panorama.
and it's only play when the baton is in front of you. Actually, Butch always did it the other way up, but
Right.
um, what else? Oh, so like pointing to your watch means I'm going to give you a tempo, play something in that tempo, and then you conduct conventionally,
Okay.
making the beat very clear. Actually, lots and lots of classical conductors don't seem to make the beat clear at all. To me, but maybe there's some other thing going
Okay.
on. Yeah, that's a few of them.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thanks.
my pleasure.
And something that I want to ask you is that do you think that is it a good or bad improvisation, and if you can give attribute those words for a performance, what do you think that makes it good or makes it bad?
That's it's a very important question, because this is why we play the music in the first place, because we think it's good. But of course, sometimes it's not as good as other times.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I feel kind of wrong about something, but there are 30 other people in the room playing it as well. Some of those might have loved it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure you could get them all to agree about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's difficult, and certainly it's interesting, because I've been playing with the Glasgow Improvisers Orchestra,
Okay.
who are doing these Zoom things
Huh.
twice a week. I like them very much, but I feel, I mean, I'm going to feel detached anyway, because I'm just the only person in the room.
Uh-huh.
You know, everybody's in their own room, like we are now. But
Right.
if you imagine there's a whole strip of people that goes on, you have to go pages of
Mm-hmm.
people to see how many people are in the ensemble, and it can be
Mm-hmm.
quite a lot of people there from all over the world as well,
Okay.
which is fantastic. And it's also an issue,
Mm-hmm.
just to a sidebar, that free improvisation is a thing that works very well and isn't really encumbered by the issues of what they call latency, which is where there's a slight delay on things, especially if the people are living in Australia and you're living in London. There might be
Mm-hmm.
a slight delay for you to hear what they played.
Right.
So if you're playing music that requires people to play in a tempo and play in rhythmic unison, it's very hard to do. But with free improvisation, you can kind of deal with that looseness, that slight wiggle room
Mm-hmm.
in the timing. So to get back to your question, I think it has to be how you feel ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
That there are no set criteria to how a piece works. I've seen, I mean, people keep making sets of rules for how to play free improvised music properly. I've read them. They haven't done it for a while, but I remember them. One is you shouldn't play so loudly that you can't hear the other people.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. I see that. And generally, I would say that's a good idea. But I've seen Han Benink and Misha Mengelberg. Misha plays the piano, Han plays the drums. I've seen entire sets
Mm-hmm.
where Han Benink has made Misha completely inaudible. You can't hear him at all for maybe 40 minutes.
Okay.
Still loved it. I mean, of course, these musicians are amazing musicians, and their relationship is amazing as
Mm-hmm.
well. I mean, unfortunately, Misha is now passed on, but I
Yeah.
loved that band. But they kind of did everything that, if you sat down and had to make a list of things you should do in free improvisation, they kind of broke all those laws,
Right.
and
Right.
they were still amazing. So the fact is that these are useful guidelines. And certainly we say this from time to time, but none of them are 100%,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, so it's so hard to come up with anything to explain why something was good or why it was bad. It's really, really hard to do.
Yeah. Totally. I
Yeah.
agree, and
That's why you asked, Purdue,
yeah,
really.
sure.
Yeah.
That's sure. And something that some another thing related to free improvisation is that I've heard and I've read uh, that Butch Morris complained sometimes to work with free improvisators and people who were improvising and who have a career on free improvisation, and he wrote complaining about that those people doesn't want to have a conductor, and they
Uh-huh.
want to feel free. And I wonder if you have any considerations about this.
Okay. My first consideration is getting dark here. I'm going to turn some lights on.
Okay, no
So
problem.
give me just 2 seconds. Okay, that's better. Okay, well, I can do no better than to tell the oft-told story of Derek Bailey,
Perfect.
who was a good friend and colleague of mine, who was an incredible guitarist from what they call the first generation of free improvisers in England.
Hmm.
And he sat in with Butch Morris and in a rehearsal
Okay.
with Butch conducting. And at the end of the first piece, Butch said to Derek, "You've got to watch me, Derek, because it's not going to work unless you watch me." And Derek Bailey just packed up and left.
Okay.
So, what was the question? What was the question?
The question is that is just that it's just if you have any considerations about the uh, I mean how do I put that about the relationship between free improvisation and conducted improvisation. I think
Oh,
yeah.
well, the relation. No, I think the relationship is absolutely clear. It is possible, but much more difficult to get non-improvising musicians to play in a conduction
Oh really?
uh, because a great deal of the information is still not given to them through signals. As I said before,
Hmm.
I can tell you to play loudly at this point, at a particular point. I tell you to play loudly. I ask you to play loudly, I should say,
Hmm.
and fast. But that's kind of all I can do. So if you're a musician who really plays only with printed, notated music in front of them,
Hmm.
then you're going to be at a loss, aren't you? I
Hmm.
mean, the fact is that improvisers are not only good at improvising music, but usually good at dealing with situations.
Hmm.
You know, maybe suddenly, I don't know, three notes have gone on the piano, three strings are broken on the piano. So how do you
Hmm.
get around that? Well, if you're playing Beethoven, you can't get around it because all the notes are there. You have to play those notes, and they involve the three strings that are broken. Oh dear, you can't do the piece.
Yeah.
As an improviser, I suppose there are almost two definitions of the word improvising. One is to make things up as you go along, and the other is to deal with things that have gone wrong. We have a bucket, we need to carry some water, there's a hole in the bucket. What do we do?
Uh-huh.
That kind of improvising. Those are two related but different types of improvising. So I would say, um, I mean, this is always thrown back in our face, especially as piano players, because as you know, most places have terrible pianos
Uh-huh.
and you kind of go, well, this is horrible. And then inevitably somebody will say, you're an improviser. Why don't you improvise? You should be able to deal with this. I don't know how far this could go. What if they sort of kidnapped you and tied your arms and legs up and then said, play the piano? Is that still, are they still going to laugh at you if you can't do it and say, you're an improviser, you should be able to deal with this sort of stuff. But I think improvisers are resourceful
Hmm.
and can deal with a different situation because every situation is different. If you're a piano player, every time you play a different gig, it's a different piano.
Hmm.
That's a kind of nightmare. I mean, I think a saxophone player, quite understandably, would be very upset if they had to play a different instrument every night of their
Hmm.
lives.
Yeah.
That would be really difficult because you build up a relationship with your instrument. Of course you do.
Of course. Yeah.
But you don't really build up a relationship. I mean, this is actually, funnily enough, the baby grand I have in my front room. Um, I've probably built up a much more powerful relationship with that piano
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
in the virus times than I did before that because I sat next to it all day and I've worked out things on it and played it much more.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. But normally, I mean, apart from your home piano, you would not build up a relationship with the piano.
Yeah. Sure.
So, so we always, as piano players, even more than improvising musicians, we have to improvise given the situation. That's not to mention things like I don't know, the seat's too low, or it's cold, or the acoustics are terrible, or those are things that are issues as well, of course.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
uh, you kind of answered one question that I did for everyone who participated in this series, which was, do you think can something go wrong on stage? And you are telling me that the improviser is that person who can deal with everything that go on stage. Am I
yeah.
right?
Well, up to a point. I mean, I'm thinking of the what was his name? The band leader, the West Indian band leader, Ken Snakehips Johnson.
Okay.
You ever heard of Ken Snakehips Johnson?
No, not
He had
really.
a great band. My dad had some 78s of Ken Snakehips Johnson's band, and I just assumed it was an American band,
Hmm.
an African American band. But actually, it was an English Afro Caribbean, mainly Afro Caribbean band. And they played in the Café de Paris, just off Piccadilly Circus in London,
Hmm.
through the war, because it was in a basement. So they thought, well, we'll be okay. We're not going to get blown up by a bomb in the basement, so we'll just carry on. But one night there was a bomb that got through, and it killed.
Oh no,
The,
that's
so
tragic.
that, yes, it was tragic. Many great musicians were killed in that attack. Yeah, including Ken Snakehips Johnson. Um, so I think that's something we can't really deal with. Physical violence.
Yeah, sure.
We did cause a fight in the audience once. I remember.
Ah,
This was not. This was
can you
not.
tell this story?
I don't. You see, I don't really remember what was going on.
Okay.
I think it was. Uh, it's a little actually it would take too long, and it's slightly boring by the end.
Okay.
So I'm not going to tell you.
All
Let's
right.
leave it more mysterious. Let's leave it mysterious.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, up to a point, of course. I mean, people deal with problems with that. Lol Coxhill always had, when he went on tour, he had his soprano saxophone
Hmm.
and maybe a toothbrush. That was it. That's slightly worrying. And also lots of rubber bands, because he would mend his saxophone with rubber bands.
Hmm.
Certainly when he was on tour, but even when he wasn't on tour, because saxophone is very complicated. Things
Yeah.
go wrong with them all the time.
Yeah.
So you had to have the rubber bands in order to make sure that you could still play it. Depends on if something goes wrong on stage. I mean, people. Yeah, I think things do go wrong on stage, and I think one of the things I've been thinking about recently is uh, passages of incoherence. It's what
Okay.
classical 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 music writers would call inchoate.
Hmm.
It's not a word people use much. They seem to think that it's okay for, I don't know, Helmut Lachenmann to write music that has sections that are inchoate, that is to say, confused and vague and things going on and
Hmm.
it not being clear. But they don't like it when inchoate passages are coming out of free improvisation. But I'm now thinking that you should have those passages. They're passages from one thing to another.
Okay.
And I think it's really important to have those passages. And that's why, in a way, I've got much looser about what you put on a record of improvised music.
Okay.
I tend to go, okay, I like section A, I like section C. The bit in between, I thought was kind of a mess. But then I realized the mess is where section C came from. Something got worked out in section B.
Okay.
And I mean, there's probably a limit to how long the inchoate section B should last, but things can be uncomfortable and people can play wrong notes. I mean, look at Miles Davis and Don Cherry, two of my favorite musicians.
Hmm.
They played mistakes all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
A trumpet is a difficult instrument. You will fluff notes, you'll go for a note and miss it. But they were both amazing improvisers, and I love all the music. I wouldn't go around. I wouldn't pick out the mistake to make a recording of all the mistakes by Miles Davis or all the mistakes by Don Cherry, but they're part of the music,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're part of the development. And what comes after that mistake might be more interesting because of the mistake.
Okay. It's interesting, and it's a kind of odd because you are answering my questions just before I asked them, and you kind of reading my mind. That's crazy.
Funny.
So I
That's very funny.
I definitely had a question about how do you like to record improvisation, and let me just ask you one question about that because I'm not sure if I get everything you said, but I wanna know if you are if do you approve to overdub or to record or to take something off when you record improvisation. Do you think that it's possible to cut something that you don't like it,
Yeah, of
or
course. Sure. I mean, I mean, obviously, if you put something online, that there are no limits to how long the piece can be. But clearly, in the days of vinyl, you couldn't go much beyond 20 minutes aside.
Mhm.
Um, there's a story about, I think it was the record with, this is Misha Mengelberg again, with Han Benning, I think John Chikai and Derek Bailey.
Mhm.
And apparently, Misha, as soon as he got bored with it, he would cut it.
Okay.
That would be the end. So the record is edited very harshly. It just stops. Each track just stops.
Uh-huh.
That's where the scissors went. That's fine. I'm not against overdubbing. I think there's some interesting overdubbing
Hmm.
going on. I mean, that people have, well, Bill Evans did it, didn't he? I mean, actually, Sidney Bechet did it, where he played all the instruments. That's a very early overdub thing. One of the first overdubs. It was the King of Araby, the King of Araby, that song.
Mhm.
But Bill Evans did Conversations with Myself. Um, and I think Paul Rutherford did some overdubs. I'm sure Evan Parker did some overdubs.
But do you
Uh,
have any references on conducted improvisation overdubs?
ah, I don't know anything about that. No, I
Okay.
couldn't help you with that.
Okay.
I do know that Butch Morris did a session for the music for Star Trek,
Okay.
Deep Deep Space Nine, because he knew the actor whose name I can never remember,
Mhm.
but he played the commander of the space station,
All
and he
right.
was a friend of Butch's. So he said, "Come in and play some music for Star Trek," and that was conducted.
Okay.
I really would love. I've watched all of Deep Space Nine. I've never heard anything that sounds like Butch Morris's conduction. My guess is they didn't use it, but still,
Oh.
it's a lovely idea. But in terms of overdubbing, I'm perfectly fine
Yeah.
with that. I
It.
think what I mean, I think it's a useful tool. I think people have to be aware of the limitations of technology.
Mhm.
So, for instance, I've seen Bill Frisell, for instance, use a loop station. He does this very well. That's why I've mentioned his name, because Bill Frisell is a genius at building up. He'll play a bass line and then chords and then maybe a riff, and he'll build that up with live with layers of himself and then play over the top. It always works really well because Bill Frisell is such an amazing musician, but he understands that there are many things you can't do with a loop station.
Yeah.
And if you're hearing the music very conventionally, then you'll be producing stuff that is like, I don't know, a 32 bar pop song,
Mhm.
which means it has a bridge, but you can't go to a bridge with a loop. You can just do those 4 bars over and over again. And if it's there's lots of music that I love that just goes round and round with 4 bars. It doesn't change key and it doesn't go anywhere. That's fine. That's a vamp. Lots of James Brown, you know,
Hmm.
when he doesn't scream "take it to the bridge," it doesn't go to the bridge. So you can build obviously lots of electronic dance music doesn't have a bridge. It just goes round and round in two, usually sometimes just 2 bar loops.
Hmm.
So you can do that, but you have to be aware of the limitations of that. You have to find another way of keeping the music interesting, because you can't change it to something else in a loop station
Right.
unless you've already recorded that stuff. But lots of loop people seem to feel that you have to do it all live, you know. So that's a limitation of that. And also, of course, there's a limitation because everything's exactly the same. And I'm very interested in the idea of very simple rhythms, but which are played live. I would hold up the great drummer Al Jackson, who played with Otis Redding. He played with Al Al Green, amazing drummer who
Hmm.
never played anything complicated, but had an incredible feel. He would play the simplest patterns.
Yeah.
So that's because he's a human and not a machine. You know,
Okay.
machines are great. I like them very much, but they have limitations.
Hmm.
And so overdubbing has limitations as well.
Of course.
And of course, I mean, if we have, I think Paul Rutherford did like 3 trombone pieces, which was all him.
Hmm.
And the issue is that trombone number 1 can't respond to trombone number 3 because it's a recording. That's the only problem. There's no interlocking
Hmm.
of the material.
Hmm.
And there's another interesting thing, because I used to do quite a lot of commercial music, and of course we never had any money, so we thought, oh, we need a string section. We'll just bring in one fiddle player, and they can just play all 5 parts and play each one twice or something. It doesn't work
Yeah.
because the whole thing about the string section is that all those string players have a slightly different intonation, a slightly different tone, and so on, a slightly different vibrato or no vibrato, depending. And all those things make that music much richer. If you have the same person, you don't have that variety of tone.
I totally agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree. Yeah. That's great. That's great. And thank you for sharing those great stories. It's been outstanding to chat with you, Steve. And
Well, it's great to talk to you.
yeah,
Thank you for having me.
and maybe I have one last question that I prepared for you, and
Okay.
it is, if you can share one story that is very important for you within this field of conducted improvisation, something that you remember and keep with great care.
Um, I don't really come out with stories in that way.
Okay,
You can't press a button on me and a story will pop out. I'm sorry, I can't do it.
no problem.
Sorry. I find stories very useful to illustrate points,
Right.
but I don't have a, a a shelf full of stories. I
Yeah.
can go,
No.
oh, here's a story. I don't. I mean, comedians do that. Comedians have those things at their, but I can't do that. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Um,
Yeah.
well, maybe I could introduce to something that I've been thinking here in Brazil,
Okay.
and I've always thinking about how conducted improvisation is, it can be used as a social practice, something
Yeah.
to develop the relationship between people. I'm pretty sure that free improvisation does that as well. But even
Yeah.
for that people who are not improvisers, I think conducted improvisation could be a bridge between those people who can't really improvise, or even who people who are not musicians at all. And
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe you can have some comments on that.
Oh wow. Okay, you touched on some issues that are very close to my heart. Let me just go to my bookshelf and
Okay.
get a book. So this book here, which is called John Stevens' Search and Reflect, which was first published in 1985, and then we republished it in 2007, is a product of John Stevens's workshops, where he developed pieces which would work with people of all relationships to music. Some of them had never played in their lives. Some of them were virtuosi. Some of them were classical musicians, some jazz, blah, 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 blah. So for John Stevens, the late John Stevens, he's been gone for a long time now, who's an incredible drummer, had an amazing band called the Spontaneous Music Ensemble, and was a massive pain in the ass, but we loved him dearly, and he was a great visionary and an incredible musician. So he was deeply, deeply committed to democracy, to drawing people of every possible background in, with every possible music background, and making something that they could understand instantly almost. Okay. So for instance, one of the pieces is called Sustained Piece, and it's simply you play a note as you breathe out, and then you don't play as you breathe in. So I think, and he's kind of the roots of UK free improvisation, one of the most important innovators in UK free improvisation. Derek Bailey, Evan Parker, Paul Rutherford, Barry Guy, all these people came through working with John Stevens. And I was instrumental in convincing these people, the publishers, to republish it. The original publishers were Community Music, and Community Music became a place where you would do workshops and learn music, and John Stevens was one of the directors, but they never republished it. So this other publishing firm called Rock School republished it, but they didn't really know what to do with it. They knew it was a good book, but they didn't know how to get it out. Anyway, so what John Stevens did was incredibly important. I'm no good at those pieces. Ironically, I can't teach John Stevens pieces. Okay. I could play in them, but I'm not really a very good director of them, or, workshop instigator or whatever, right. And I find, okay, so the social aspects of particularly large group improvisation are particularly interesting in a huge place like London. London is a massive city. Yeah. It's much bigger than many cities. It's not a walking city. New York is. You can walk around New York. It's great to walk around. London, the distances are too damn far. So you need, for people like musicians who are, particularly improvising musicians, tend to be very social people. Yeah. They like hanging out. And one of the reasons we wanted to put that band together, the London Improvised Orchestra, one of the reasons was that we loved being on tour and all being in a coach and talking. We talked about music all the time. Nice. There were 20 musicians, some of whom didn't really know each other. And we just talked and talked and talked. We loved hanging out. Mm-hmm. So now, well, not literally now, because of course we're all locked in, but normally that's a place where people can meet. For instance, the great late Lol Coxhill would come to a London Improvised Orchestra gig, but maybe not play, or maybe he'd play a couple of pieces. He wasn't feeling very well, but we were very glad to see him because it's a hangout. It's a good place to hang, and we don't have that many places in London. Cafe Oto is a great place to hang. They do really good coffee. Mm-hmm. They do soshu, for God's sake. They have really good Japanese food. I'm praying that they will be back after this whatever this is, this pandemic.
Yeah.
But that's on that social level, on the social level of musicians working together and meeting each other and getting new ideas, and people from other countries coming into the country and saying, can we sit in? And we always say yes. That kind of stuff is on that social level, it's very important.
Yeah.
On another social level, I find conduction is quite understandable to people who don't know anything about improvised music. You're quite right. And my workshops tend to work around Butch Morris signals.
Mm-hmm.
That's if somebody asked me to do a workshop, I will probably do it like that. And that seems to work
Yeah.
because the idea comes from the conductor rather than the musician. If you put people who've never played free improvisation in an ensemble and say do something,
Mm-hmm.
they can't. Just making that initial decision
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is really hard.
Yeah, it is definitely.
But if you've got somebody saying play something that lasts a long time, then at least you've got something to grip. And I think you can move out of that into unconducted for
Yeah,
improvisation.
totally.
I think so. On that level, it also makes sense. On that, a slightly different angle on the question of social music. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm David Toots' book, Into the Maelstrom, which I think is an amazing book. Everybody should read. Has a huge amount about John Stevens. David went to these workshops. It's one of his roots as a musician, and 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 he thinks a lot about the politics of the music, the social aspects of the music, and it's all in that book. I think it's definitely something that you should look at.
I will definitely check it out. Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Steve, I can't thank you enough for, talking with me and sharing those great ideas. Really, really thank you so much. And I really hope that you keep well and, and keep playing, and I hope we can meet each other soon again. It's
Well,
been
that would be
great.
great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That would be great. Yes.
Okay.
I hope so very, very much indeed. Thank you so much.
All right.